when you were 12 or 15 or 20 or even 25, I doubt, Silka, you nor I had this belief that there aren't any good men out there, or there aren't any good women out there,
No, it didn't
right?
occur to us.
Didn't occur to us.
Did you push record?
Thank you so much for tuning into our second act with Paige and Silka. Today is our expert segment day again, and I'm happy to welcome Daryl Gurney back to our program. Daryl, thanks so much for joining me again.
Thanks for having me, Silka.
Well, here we are at the start of, a new year. There's lots of focus on, improving ourselves, et cetera, et cetera. You, of course, are the expert when it comes to living your life to the fullest after 40 with the Back 40 platform, which most of our viewers are familiar with now, and I'll be sure to link to all your information. Daryl is a career coach, a life coach, and also a relationship coach, and that's what we want to focus on today, is, finding love again after 50, and all the issues that are associated or that we bring to the table, one of which is the belief, and I hear this from a lot of women, is that there are no more good men out there. Where are the good men after 50, Daryl? How do we even start that conversation?
Well, let's start the conversation by acknowledging the belief that you see on social media and that a lot of women entertain. And by the way, I'm sure it's not just women either. We're talking about, good men out there today, but I'm sure there's a lot of men that are wondering, are there good women out there? But regardless of the gender of the question, I guess first it's acknowledging that question exists. And then I think the first thing is to look at why that question exists. Like, what's the source of the question? When you were 12 or 15 or 20 or even 25, I doubt, Silka, you nor I had this belief that there aren't any good men out there, or there aren't any good women out there,
No,
right?
it didn't occur to us.
Didn't occur to us because we were available to life, we were learning, we were exploring, and life was a big experiment, right?
Right.
It's like you can't fail at anything because you haven't even tried yet, and so one of the things I think is important to even shape this conversation is this idea, kind of the basic philosophy of the Back 40, which says, what if your whole first half of life was just R&D, research and development for who you really came here to be and what you really came here to do? Now, there's lots of books about relationships out there. But when you're 12 and 15 years old, you're not reading them. And your parents are telling you a lot of things about, the kind of boy to pick or the kind of girl to pick and all these kind of things where you're sure as hell not listening to them.
No.
And so what you're doing is you're running experiments.
Well, and then, of course, life happens to you, and what we've been put through has jaded us at this point, and thus the belief that there's no more good men out there.
Right.
And
so I think the first important step is to realize that everything that's happened has been your experiment stage. Okay? In other words, for you to even come to a question, are there good men out there? That means stuff happened to you.
Yeah.
Okay? And now you're, a little bit doubtful or hurt or, quote, damaged. And so one of the first steps that we make available in the Back 40 is a process by which you go back and you take all those awful things that happened to you, and you actually start to, this is going to sound crazy, but you actually start to put yourself in the design mode of having put it all together. What if those relationships that hurt you, you could go back and look at for how you got to grow and what you saw about yourself and how you're now going to self-express differently. I didn't say go into a shell, but in other words, what if there's clues in those relationships to show you more of who you came here to be and what you came here to do? If, and again, this is a big job, won't be handled in one 9-minute video, but if you can actually go back and get to a point where you're grateful and thankful for everyone you brought into your life, for the contribution they made to have you see more of yourself, then there's no taintedness, and you could actually look now, if you can get yourself to that place of being a 20-year-old again, and it's like, okay, good. Now that I've seen this about myself, what do I want to go create now?
So what you're saying is that when the taintedness that we bring to the table is what attracts or what
Repels.
repels, exactly. And so
Yeah.
we have the belief that we bring, we make that happen.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there are nothing but, and it is when I talk to people like that who have expressed that, because I don't feel like that, obviously,
And you had a challenge of your
yes,
own.
and lots of people have, but I
25
just
year marriage, right?
right, and
Yeah.
I mean I just refuse to go there because it's bitter. You don't want to live like that,
Right.
So when you bring that to the table, then you're creating your own belief. You're manifesting that into reality.
Right.
So it's not really about, are there good men? Of course there's good men out there. And
Look.
there's good women out there. And, for me, sometimes it's hard, especially when I, on this platform, or when people ask me questions, or when you get people that, women that are just have given up hope, is when you do see a lot of the negative feedback or the ugly feedback. And you just go, gosh, why do people do this? To me, I don't get it. I mean, do you have any answer that you can provide?
I don't know if it's an answer, but I can give some exercises, okay? And I had a really profound experience about, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago. There was actually, now I am married now. I've been married for 3.5 months, but we've been together for 4.5 years. Prior to that, I was a single guy for 18 years. I was in different relationships. But there was a woman that I was going to start dating, and I took her on a first date, and it was interesting for a first date. It was actually a personal development kind of workshop thing where, and it was like a 3-hour thing. And what happened was there was a circle of women. Well, I started with a circle of men, and women were in an outside circle. And the facilitator was asking questions about relationships and about women and all that. And only the men could interact with the other men. I'm sorry, it started with the women in the circle. I can't remember. But get it that at one point there was only women in the circle. At one point there was only men in the circle. And the outside had to listen and not interact. Okay? And so this woman I brought, she was actually in tears after listening to these men interact among themselves around these questions of relationships and women and, their deepest feelings and all this stuff. She was in tears. She said, I didn't know there were men like that out there. I didn't know that men felt that way. So it was actually a shock to her that I brought her to this thing. Okay. But what it proved for me is that left to one's own devices and opinions and views, without any commitment that there's something else possible outside of those views, you're going to keep getting what you think there is, right? So the first shakeup is to consider, well, what if I'm wrong? Just what if my, quote, belief that's been embedded by all these things that have happened to me, what if I'm wrong? Then you start experimenting with evidence for the contrary. And there's lots of ways one can do that.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And it's so true. And we are coming to the end of our segment. So I want to wrap it up by saying that, the debate is, are there any good men out there? It's a rhetorical question. It's a question we just throw out. Are there any good women out there? On the other hand, we'll be doing, programming on that. It's rhetorical. Of course there are. It's how you get there, what you bring to the table. Just like you said, you have to change where you're coming from, and all of a sudden things will probably change for you. Daryl, is there anything else that you want to add before we sign off? Because I want to bring you back for I want to bring you back for another segment where we talk about how do we find those good men and women.
Well, I think the first thing, or what I would leave viewers with right now, is if there's that question there, realize that behind that question, there's hope, there's desire, and it's just going to be what you now do with that hope and desire. Because below resignation, below anger and sadness, there's always like something we want beyond what we see, and that we can work with.
Terrific. Daryl, we'll see you in our next segment of Our Second Act with Paige and Silka.